Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Thibault back. This is the second installment of our three-part series in your conference on mental health. With this particular section, I'm entitling it Managing or Taking Responsibility for Our Mental Health. So before we begin, I'm hoping that we can all agree that the concept of managing our mental health is not about resurrecting our psychological well-being long after it's gone off the rails. Rather, the intent behind this message is starting from a position of health and then putting the significant and purposeful efforts into place in order to maintain or enhance it. Too many people think about fixing things once they're broken. Much like the concept of weight management, if I were to make that a central theme in my life, it would be a smart idea to do that before I gained 100 pounds. Well, it's exactly the same thing with our mental health. Our job is to be very proactive with our mental health, and in so doing, we create what we call a lifestyle configuration that makes mental health as easy as brushing our teeth twice daily. We don't necessarily put it in our calendar. We don't block off specific time to do that. It simply fits in, and we do that every single day. As a matter of fact, in the absence of doing it, it would be noticeable. That's not to suggest that we will always be able to deal with or stave off the influence of even critical or crisis situations as they occur simply through the use of these day-to-day routines. We're all wise enough to know that every now and then we do need to ramp things up in our response. In our efforts to maintain a position of great mental health, we have to take the responsibility for many things in our lives. For example, our sleep routines, where we do try to get into a routine on purpose. It also means making sure that we give ourselves not only enough time, but we also have the right mechanisms to rest. That's not just sleep, but it's also to rest. What we eat and when we eat are very significant influences in our emotional well-being. And here's another interesting concept I've always paid attention to, is never allowing ourselves to be in a position where we have to break our body's inertia. Instead, we have to be committed to moving our body as consistently and regularly as we can, knowing that the body is happier and it's healthier when it's being used. What we think, when we think, and even where we install those thoughts in our minds are fully within our control. The capacity for us to examine circumstances from many different angles is what we call in our profession reframing, and it is particularly important when it comes to our mental well-being. Upon review, many circumstances that we face in our lives and that we house have more than one meaning, or, can be approached or solved from more than one angle. This path is a path that takes us from one of sadness to gratefulness. And I'll give you an example, especially today in these days of COVID. You could have a very busy parent who is working 60 hours a week outside of the home and not having enough time with their partners or with their kids. Their boss may come to them and they would say, we're going to temporarily lay you off, but we'll be bringing you back to work in a few months. It sounds like sad news in the beginning, absolutely. But in speaking with them shortly after, if they have the view that they now have time with their partners that they didn't have and an opportunity to reconnect with their children, then that's a reframe. And that is done through our own mental control. At times, a regular routine of writing out our thoughts can render great clarity for us. But in addition, having people around us in the forms of friends and family whose opinions we can seek will also help us a good deal. To coin or add to a phrase that we've used for years, many minds make light work. In my relationships, or the ones whom I've invested in with my wife, my kids, my friends, my family, they are the linchpins in my pursuit of mental stability. And I know that if any reason I am cavalier about these bonds and choose not to do what's required in order to maintain them, then the relationships will probably fracture, and so too will my emotional stability. I remind myself daily that I can control what I put into these bonds, and hence I have more control over what I call the finished product. The principle of reciprocity is alive and well in our relationships and cannot be expected to generate benefit for us if we don't put benefit in. I'm going to give you an example. If I want to have a close, intimate, and emotional relationship with my wife, as I walk in the door at the end of my workday, I would be very wise to think about and follow through on giving her a hug and a kiss and asking her how her day is. There's a far greater chance that she is going to want to greet me day after day if that's how I respond to her. So, the point is, we do these things on purpose, and we can take charge of that. Finally, in those circumstances when we are not at our best or feeling mentally well, we must pay attention to and elect to do something to change it. As we said this morning, we cannot allow the stigma around mental health to prevent us from seeking professional assistance or simply having a conversation, a preliminary conversation with a trusted friend or a family member or even a peer, because they do want to talk with us. We're probably going to talk a bit more about that concept of peer a little bit later tomorrow. However, all of that to say that there are many pieces that we control that help us to maintain our mental health. Now, I had promised that we were going to introduce you to another friend and another guest speaker today. In a moment, you're going to have a chance to meet a very dear friend, and his name is Des Gesso. Des is one of the senior air traffic controllers for NAV Canada Corporation out of Gander, Newfoundland. He has a huge responsibility in his job, and he will be very open with you about some of the pressure that he has felt and the influence that it's had on his mental health. Hey, Des. How are you?
Hi. I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Good, good. It's just great to see you again. With COVID, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been too long.
Yeah, yes. When we're done, I definitely want you to say hi to Connie for me, if you don't mind.
100%.
You have no idea how much I appreciate you taking the time here. I know that you're busy. I've given you a little bit of a preamble as to what we're going to be talking about in terms of the importance of mental health in the cemetery and funeral industry. And so I think your insights and your information will be really helpful. So as a bit of a background for everyone, you're when I say senior, I mean respected long-term air traffic controller. I don't mean in terms of your age, here for NAV Canada, and you're operating out of Gander, Newfoundland. And I've been very honest that you and I have had some pretty open and transparent conversations as a friend. But let me start off this way. Most people in the general public really have no idea what it is that an air traffic controller does. And I'm wondering if you would take a second just to kind of briefly explain that to me, and how it is an ex-engineer decides to become an air traffic controller.
Okay. So basically, air traffic controllers are responsible for the safe, orderly, and efficient flow of air traffic to our Canadian airspace.
Okay.
There's two basic types. Most people are familiar with the guys up in the tower with the headset on, watching airplanes. Those guys are responsible for arrivals and departures just at the airport. And then you have the guys like myself, who's sitting in an air traffic control center, and there are 7 of those in Canada, Gander being one of them. And we're sitting there in front of a radar screen with the headset on and guiding the aircraft from one airport to another.
Okay.
For me, I work, my specialty is Gander Oceanic, which means I'm responsible for all the traffic on the North Atlantic, which is stuff back and forth from North America to Europe primarily. That's most of our traffic.
Okay. So how come from engineering to air traffic control?
That's a good question. And it's a long answer, but I'll make it brief. My specialty was as a marine mechanical. What that meant basically was I spent a lot of time away from home. I enjoyed it when I was young and I was single. Then I got married. The first year I was married, for example, I spent 10 months in Africa.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So then when I started a family, I was spending a lot of time away and it was difficult. So when I was 30, I had the opportunity to start training for air traffic control. It seemed like a good challenge, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I love working for NAV Canada, and it's different every day, and it's a good challenge. So that's it. Yeah.
So you have been very honest in the past about your own mental health and some challenges that you faced and so on. Would you be willing to kind of just give everyone a brief understanding as to what you went through?
Absolutely. So for most of my adult life, I've been living with depression.
Okay.
And I've known this for most of my life, my adult life, we'll say. And I've developed ways of dealing with it, of living with it.
Okay.
And when I feel my mood getting low, mostly it was the physical exercise, hiking and running and biking and stuff like that. Occasionally I would have to go to counseling, which I didn't mind doing. I'd go to counseling and I was open about it for the most part. However, that always worked for me up until the fall of 2018. And for some reason, which is still difficult for me to understand, and there was probably many reasons, throughout the entire fall of 2018, my mood was very, very low. I was not doing very well. I was trying. I was doing all the things I'd done before to try to improve my mental health, but it wasn't working. And early in December of 2018, I finally decided that I couldn't do it anymore, and I started making plans to end my life.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right.
And I left my home here in Gander, and I went to St. John's, Newfoundland, 3.5 hours away, and I actually wrote my suicide note, and I had obtained some pills from my doctor, lied to my doctor about why I needed some pills, and that was my plan. So fortunately, though, I did get better, and it was only help with a lot of people. So
well, to be transparent, you and I have had some very intimate, teary conversations about that, because not only are you a colleague, but you're one of my dearest friends, and we talked about that sense of support that you had and where you were and where you have come from, and I think you'll probably talk about this as we move along, in that it isn't black and white, meaning that it's a day-to-day exercise, as you try to get better. But one of the things we're going to be talking about with the audience tomorrow is going to be the idea of introducing peer support teams into their industry. You and I are both thrilled that you're alive and well to tell this story, but how did your peers in NAV Canada help out in your surviving and where you've come from since?
And I'm glad you asked that question, because it's very important. I mean, I've been a part of the peer support teams here in Gander for years myself. Two of my colleagues that are on my team actually came to St. John's to look for me, and my wife. My wife knows me really well, so she had an idea where I might be in St. John's. And I mean, we're talking, it's just 3.5 hours drive from Gander, so it was quite an excursion for them.
Mhm.
And then they drove around the city trying to find me, and I still to this day I don't know how they found me, but it was pure luck.
Okay.
I was actually sitting in the mall, finishing my, well, we'll call it my suicide note, but finishing my letter that I was writing, when all of a sudden 2 guys popped down in front of me, 2 of my peers. And I was like, how the heck did you guys find me? But anyway, I'm glad they did, because they did what they were trained to do, and they brought me home. They got me back home to Gander.
Right. Explain the distance. What's the geography between Gander and St. John's?
Well, it's 330 kilometers. So, and this was in December, so it's a 4-hour drive. Yeah, it was. And then St. John's is for anybody who doesn't know, it's a fairly big city. It's 200,000 people. So, it's a big city to try and find somebody, one individual. But somehow or another they did, and my wife was a big part of that. And but when they brought me home, of course, I still wasn't better. I was just at home.
Right.
And then 2 more of my colleagues, including the nurse that we have on staff, who's also a member of our wellness teams, they came the next day and actually brought me to the hospital, but not in Gander, a hospital in Grand Falls, because they have a better psychiatric services there.
Right.
So that's an hour drive. That's about 100 kilometers away. So they brought me there and made sure I was checked into the hospital and looked after.
Yeah.
And that worked out okay eventually. It wasn't the greatest experience at the hospital there, but eventually I got the help that I need. But it didn't end there. Those peer supporters and other friends in that, they still, to this day, and we're talking almost 2 years later now, they're still checking on me, and we do it with each other, and that's part of our peer team. We check on each other, and so the care continues to this day, really.
Yeah. Well, again, in an effort to be transparent, as for everyone to know, you were not only a key member of that peer support team, that same peer support team that was there to help you, but you were also instrumental in the development of that peer support team. You've actually been a teacher with me when we've done that.
Right.
And so to be on the receiving end of that assistance, when you look back on it now, would you say it works?
Would I say it worked? It works 100%. Even when I knew the guys, what they were doing and the things they were saying to me, and I knew it was part of our training, and I wasn't really wanting to receive it,
right?
Because, the nature of this disease, my brain was saying like, no, I don't want to hear this now.
Yeah.
So, but it was still working. It still worked. And so definitely the training was helping. And for me, to explain too, being somebody with lived experience with depression, and volunteering in mental health field as a peer supporter, it's always helped me. Learning about mental illness, from you and other professionals has always helped me dealing with my own mental health issues. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to volunteer.
So what have you done? I mean, we're trying to introduce the idea of people managing and taking responsibility for their mental health. So since 2018, what have you done that you would say represents you taking responsibility for maintaining your mental health?
Yeah. Well, there's several things, of course. I have to say, for one thing for sure, would be the medication. That's the thing I started, and I wasn't really receptive to it in the beginning, but with my friend, the nurse at work, she really helped me accept it, and so we started medication in January, I guess, 2019, and that has helped a lot. I know it has. It's been life-changing, really. I can feel. I no longer have the really deep lows that I used to have.
Good. Okay. Terrific.
So that's one thing. I still go to counseling.
Yeah.
I still see my doctor. It's in terms of my employment for one thing, but I also enjoy seeing my counselor. She's really, very good. So I go see her. But I tell you, one of the biggest things is trust. And I have to have trust in my family, particularly my wife, who knows me better than anybody, of course, and my close friends. Because the nature of this disease, it's somewhat insidious. It's when I'm feeling really low, it's when my brain doesn't want me to reach out for help. My brain is telling me to shut down and leave everybody alone, be by myself. And so sometimes it's other people, my wife or my close friends will notice a change in me.
Right.
They'll see that I'm not doing well. So I need to trust them when they say, Des, are you okay? You know,
Right.
and so
And
that's
typically we would say we are okay, but to listen to their observation.
I have to listen to their observation because they will notice it more than I will sometimes, and that's just because it's again the nature of that disease. It doesn't want me to admit that there's anything wrong or reach out for help. So
and I also know, just to add to this, you talked about this in the beginning. One of the things that has always been a part of your makeup is that you're a very physical guy. You're athletic. You and I, before we started our recording, just talked about you taking a bike trip. It was, what was it,
120 kilometers, yeah.
Right. It's a long way to go for lunch, I can tell you that.
Yeah, all hills too, all uphill.
Yeah. So here's my last question, if you don't mind my asking, and that is recommendations. What recommendations would you make to a brand new air traffic controller as it applies to their managing and owning their own mental health?
I like this question.
Okay.
Because I've been involved in training as well for a long time. For most of my career, I've been training. I've had dozens and dozens of trainees, either in the school or on the floor. Mm-hmm. So, and I enjoy that. I enjoy it when we have new students and molding those new students. We talk about removing the stigma of mental health, and that's something that we continuously work on and will work on forever, is removing the stigma of mental health. So that's something I talk about with students. I don't mind sharing my experience. Mm-hmm. I like to share my experiences for other people. I tell the students or anybody, we don't have a problem with admitting when we have a physical problem. If you break your arm, you can tell the story about how you broke your arm. People still have issues with mental health, but they need to know. So I want the students to know that it's okay to be not okay.
That's a great phrase. I like that phrase. Okay.
And that's fine. And we all have days like that, so that's fine. There's nothing abnormal about that. It's quite normal. Our training as air traffic controllers is very, very stressful. Right. It's the most stressful part of your time. So they're going to have mental health issues with training. It'll be strange if they didn't. It would be abnormal if they didn't. So, and if you look at an air traffic controller, whether he's in the tower or in the center, and you'll see them sitting to the sector by themselves, and you think, okay, this is an individual doing his job, but it's not. He's just part of a team. We're all part of one team. And that teamwork starts in the classroom, when those students start in the classroom. They're going to work very close together. Okay. And they're very stressed, a lot of stress in their training, so they're going to become very close. So it's similar to what we just spoke about, is they have to look out for each other.
Good point.
And I'll try to stress to them that, they're going to help each other with their training, but they're also going to help look out for each other if they'll notice when somebody is not themselves. Yeah. Not that there's any problem with that. You're going to have days where you're not yourself, but you got to rely again on your classmates, on your teammates, mm-hmm. and they'll help you with their stress and help you with your training.
It seems to go back to that same message that you shared a few minutes ago about, the peer teams and those who helped you, and maintaining. A lot of it has to do with trusting those around you.
Absolutely.
And when we talked about stigma with Chris King, one of the concepts behind it was that we have to dismiss this idea that other people are going to think poorly of us. And what you're telling us is turn the idea into knowing that those people actually want to help you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, and a very selfish. Go ahead.
Sorry. I could just add one more thing to the students, because NAV Canada is a world leader when it comes to their wellness programs. Right. And one of the programs we have, of course, you and I were instrumental in getting it off the ground. Well, you were, I should say. I helped a little bit. There's a Thrive program. So the students have a mentor. It's got a mentorship. They have a mentor assigned to them from day one. Right. And another thing I want to stress to the students is rely on your mentor. He wants to help you. Your Thrive peer is very knowledgeable. He's been through the training. He's been through all that stress. So, take advantage of that and use that resource.
100%. That concept of trust is the thing that resonates for me, Des. So I want to thank you. I know that you're busy. We're going to finish off now. I'm probably going to extend your information to the association or the professional group of cemetery and funeral professionals. Should anyone want to reach out and just ask you some other questions, would that be okay?
I was going to suggest that, actually, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You can pass on my information, my contact information. If anybody would like to speak further, I'll be only too happy to help.
Good. Okay. Thank you, my dear friend. I'm going to just finish our recording now, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, Bill, thanks.